So, my dear doctor friends, my name is Dr. Jatan Kumar Raychaudhuri, and today's topic of discussion is uterine fibroids. I am highly indebted to the textbook of Berek and Novak's Gynecology, Williams Gynecology, Clinical Gynecologic Endocrinology and Infertility, ACOG and RCOG journals. Clinical features: asymptomatic. Almost 50% fibroids, including large fibroids, are asymptomatic and may be detected incidentally on routine examination and ultrasonography. Menstrual symptoms: abnormal uterine bleeding. Nearly 50% of patients suffer from heavy menstrual bleeding, especially the submucous fibroids, because of the following reasons: increased vascularity of uterus, distorted cavity with increased surface area, presence of fibroids interfere with the uterine contraction, presence of fibroids may result in dilatation and stasis of the venules, hyperestrogenic state with associated endometrial hyperplasia. Fibroid polyp and ulceration on the surface of the submucous fibroid may result in intermenstrual bleeding. Since abnormal uterine bleeding is not the classical clinical presentation of fibroid, so one point has to be kept in mind. Coagulopathy in the form of von Willebrand's disease, PID and tubo-ovarian pathology, and malignancy, especially patients over 40 years, may be associated and may be responsible factor for the abnormal bleeding in a case of fibroid patient. This picture is taken from Williams Gynecology, and it shows clearly the position of the arcuate vessels, radial vessels, basal vessels and spiral vessels. And it shows that how the spiral venules are dilated following pressure on the arcuate vein by the serosal fibroids or subserous fibroids. Then radial veins are compressed by the intramural fibroids, and submucous fibroids press the basal and spiral veins so that the dilated venules, and these engorged venules produce lots of menorrhagia, which are not amenable to usual hormonal treatment. The next important symptom is pain. Women with fibroids are only slightly more likely to experience pelvic pain than women without fibroids. Dysmenorrhea. Fibroid can cause both spasmodic and congestive dysmenorrhea. Spasmodic pain occurs in submucous fibroid and fibroid polyp when the uterus tries to expel the polyp, and congestive dysmenorrhea occurs due to the increased vascularity and congestion of uterus as well as adnexa. Non-cyclic pelvic pain and discomfort is more common due to traction on movement and pressure of large fibroids on adjacent viscera. Acute pain may result from degeneration of fibroid, torsion of pedunculated subserous fibroid, infection of fibroid, and acute urinary retention. Dyspareunia may be due to fibroid impaction in pelvis or large heavy mass. Urinary symptoms. A large or cervical fibroid can press on the bladder and cause urinary frequency, nocturia, and urgency, and sometimes voiding difficulty, urinary retention, and back pressure effect. Ureteric compression is mainly caused by large fibroids and broad ligament fibroids. After uterine artery embolization and a reduction of uterine volume, often there is some improvement in frequency and urgency. So also after 3 to 6 months course of GnRH agonists. Subfertility. The association between fibroid and subfertility is controversial. Submucous fibroids are commonly associated. Small interstitial and subserous fibroids do not cause subfertility and do not need removal. And the factors responsible are mechanical, which includes distortion of the cavity, interference with the movement of the sperm and fertilized ovum, tubal occlusion, and impaired tubal motility and function. And interference with the implantation. That includes endometrial thinning, poor vascularity and sometimes ulceration, changes in the cytokines and other factors for implantation, as well as immunological change of the endometrium. The next important symptom is abdominal lump. A large fibroid may present with lump or an abdominal distension. Growth of fibroids. Most fibroids grow slowly. Average growth rate is nearly 10% in 1 year. Multiple fibroids may have variable growth rate, indicating growth is dependent on factors other than the hormonal level. And growth is reduced after 35 years for white women, but not in the African American. Very few fibroids may actually reduce during observation period. In premenopausal women, rapid growth of fibroids, that means size increased by 6 weeks in 1 year, almost never indicates a sarcomatous change. Whereas women with pain and bleeding near menopause or postmenopause may have a sarcoma. Diagnosis. On general examination, anemia is quite common depending on how long and degree of heavy bleeding. On abdominal examination, it may reveal a midline mass arising from the pelvis which is firm and smooth or irregular with lower limit mostly not accessible. On bimanual examination, it may show uniformly enlarged when it is a case of single fibroid or irregularly enlarged for multiple fibroids, uterus, firm in consistency and usually non-tender. The mass is not separated from uterus except in pedunculated subserous fibroid. Cervical fibroid may be felt as a mass with stretching and thinning of the cervical lips with small uterus, and this mass is sitting on top as lantern in St. Paul's Cathedral. For diagnosis, imaging, ultrasound. It is the least expensive and the most readily available imaging technique to diagnose fibroids and differentiate it from other pelvic pathology. It is reasonably reliable for evaluation of uterine volume which are less than 375 cc and containing less than or equal to 4 fibroids. Transvaginal sonography gives better resolution for pelvic tumors, but transabdominal scan is required for large fibroids. Features vary depending on the relative proportion of muscle and fibrous tissue. More hyperechoic with fibrous tissue and with presence of degeneration. Usually appear as symmetrical, well-defined, hypoechoic, heterogeneous mass. Calcification and hemorrhage appear hyperechoic, while cystic degeneration appear anechoic. Saline inserted during saline infusion sonohysterography gives better delineation of the submucous fibroids. 3D transvaginal sonography can help better diagnosis of fibroids. MRI. It is not routinely done for fibroids. It is expensive, but it gives better resolution, more accuracy, with least inter-observer variability. On T2 weighted images, fibroids usually appear dark, homogeneous and circumscribed. MRI allows evaluation of the number, size and position of submucous, intramural and subserous fibroids and their proximity to the bladder, rectum and endometrial cavity. So MRI helps define what can be expected at surgery and may help the surgeon avoid missing fibroids during surgery or who wish to preserve fertility. It can differentiate between fibroid and adenomyoma and also helps diagnosing leiomyosarcoma when performed as gadolinium enhanced dynamic MRI. Hysterosalpingography. It is done for tubal patency in subfertility and it may reveal submucous fibroids. Hysteroscopy. A diagnostic hysteroscopy may be done to diagnose accurately the submucous myoma and operative hysteroscopy may be combined for removal. Diagnostic laparoscopy not usually done for fibroids but help in the differential diagnosis with other pelvic pathology like endometriosis. CT scan is usually less useful comparing to MRI. Intravenous urography in selected cases of large cervical and broad ligament fibroid and in cases with hydronephrosis. Effect of pregnancy on fibroids. The prevalence of fibroids in pregnancy vary. It is 18% in African American, whereas only 8% in white women based on first trimester sonography. Pregnancy has a variable effect on fibroid growth depending on the fibroid gene expression, localized receptors and circulating growth factors. Most fibroids, nearly 2/3, do not increase in size in pregnancy. In 1/3 case, fibroids grow with the greatest growth before 10th week of gestation. A reduction in fibroid size towards baseline was observed 4 weeks after delivery. Degeneration of fibroid marked by severe abdominal pain and sonographic appearance of anechoic space or coarse heterogeneous patterns develop in nearly 5% cases of fibroid in pregnancy. Effect of fibroids on pregnancy. Rarely the presence of fibroid in pregnancy leads to unfavorable outcome. However, complications may occur when placenta is implanted on fibroid or the fibroid occupies the lower uterine segment and cervix. In a study of 12,600 pregnancy, including 167 with fibroids, there is no difference in preterm birth, preterm rupture of membrane, IUGR, placenta previa, placental abruption, PPH or retained placenta. Only caesarean section rate is increased. Whereas in another study of 15,104 pregnancies, including 401 fibroids, there is no increased rate of premature rupture of membrane, but preterm birth, placenta previa and PPH are slightly increased. So also the rate of caesarean section. When placenta is implanted on fibroid, the chance of accidental hemorrhage is increased. So, considering all these factors, any decision to perform pre-pregnancy myomectomy to avoid pregnancy complications should be judged very carefully, as operation will invite adhesion and increased rate of caesarean section. Myomectomy scar in pregnancy and labor. Following myomectomy, uterine rupture in pregnancy and labor is comparatively rare. Compiling multiple studies, the rate appears to be about 1.5% before the onset of labor and 0.5% during the trial of labor. Most of the antenatal ruptures occurred before 36 weeks and the rate of rupture in labor is similar to the risk of rupture for post-seizure pregnancy. Risk depends on the number, size and position of the fibroids as well as layers of myometrial closure. In laparoscopic myomectomy, operative techniques, instruments and energy source matters. Limited use of electrosurgery and multi-layer closure as done in laparotomy is the best technique even for laparoscopic myomectomy. Thank you for your patient watching. If you like the video, please subscribe. Namaste.